Productive Pastor 74, building a Bible reading routine. Welcome back, my friends. Productive Pastor here. Another episode for you, and it's a little bit different of an episode. This is actually a replay from 7 years ago, I think, that first iteration of Productive Pastor, those 100 episodes that happened back between 2014, 2018. And I'm bringing it to you like this week for this reason. All week long, I have been on Zoom 8 hours a day. I am finally getting certified in Gallup's Clifton Strengths Assessment as a certified Clifton Strengths coach. And I'm continually, as I'm sitting here inside the certification, realizing this is so helpful for anybody in ministry to understand these things. And it's Wednesday, it's during lunch, and I'm realizing I don't have anything ready to rock and roll to send to y'all today. But what I do have is all this backlog of fantastic episodes. And the reason I'm putting this out there is this. I'm actually working on a project right now for our annual conference, and I'm realizing how the beginning point of it is the spiritual formation of the clergy. And some of you might know, I've kept a YouTube channel for years where I talk a lot about Bible reading and Bible note-taking, that sort of thing. It's kind of gone dormant the last 7 or 8 months because the podcast and Productive Pastor and the coaching and that sort of stuff has just taken off. But I'm still really, really passionate about this, and I think it's a really interesting conversation to talk about what does it look like to read in Scripture, to be using Scripture, what is the role of Scripture, all of that for people who are in ministry. So I fired up this episode, listened to it while I was eating my lunch, and kept thinking, this is what I want to send out through today for y'all to think about what does it mean. So we're going to go just straight into that content. So this episode, we're talking about something that I've been getting reader feedback from, something that y'all have been asking me about and seeing. And honestly, at first I was kind of surprised by this because I thought that, surely this topic cannot be that interesting to someone who is in ministry, but apparently it is. And so we're talking about building a Bible reading routine today, and I'm excited to share this. Okay, so on to our main conversation topic today, building a Bible reading routine. And I'm serious. I felt kind of like a dummy the first time I started thinking about that because I was like, man, people don't want to hear about this. But I realized that people have been asking about some stuff, and all stems down from a practice I have. And I shared a video on Instagram about a month ago, and since then I've been getting a lot of conversations. You can see the video over there on the show notes. But it's just me flipping through my Bible reading notebook of what I'm doing, and I've been getting more and more folks, because I post pictures fairly often in the morning of what that looks like in that process. And so folks will ask, they'll want to know what's going on, and I realized that this is a pretty important thing, and I'm working on some resources internally just for our church about this. But I decided to record this episode for the benefit of the Productive Pastor community, for all of us to kind of have this conversation. Because here's the thing, us in ministry, people think that we have absolutely no problem with Bible reading. And some of us don't. And here's the thing, I even tell people that Bible reading is the spiritual discipline that I'm good at. But it's very easy for us to catch ourselves getting to the point to where the only time we're opening up the Bible and studying it and reading it is when we're getting ready to lead, to preach, to teach, or just the vocational aspects. And we're not spending the personal time inside of the Bible that we really need to do that with. And this is a question that I ask myself sometimes about prayer, but I think it's completely appropriate. So Siri is asking us questions about the Productive Pastor right now. Thanks, Siri. And so sometimes I ask myself this question about prayer, but also about Bible. Like, what if we as leaders, what if our rhythms and our routines are on the high end of what our congregations look like? Now, we hope that's the case. I mean, if we are leading, we can't lead people somewhere we've not been ourselves. We can't be asking people to do things that we're not doing ourselves. And so this Bible reading and prayer and the spiritual disciplines, they should be on the high end. But if we can kind of honestly take an internal look and we realize that sometimes we go through seasons of having really, really crappy Bible reading practices. I mean, what is that saying? Are we able to actually be leading the congregations in that regard? The second thing is this. I've been doing a lot of work about sermons and sermon preparation and the rhythms of what it means to preach, either in series or how to preach if you are a lectionary preacher or this and that. And I've recently decided to kind of switch off and to go on to a different pattern for my own preaching. And I realized that it's going to take me having the ability to have like one-shot messages, meaning there's a Sunday that's going to be independent of a series, and realizing how on earth do you develop those things? You can't do any of this if we're not regularly reading Scripture. Even if like we're and I remember the times that I've served in churches that were lectionary based, that got incredibly tough because it was right there in front of me. I never had that tension point to be reading ahead, to be reading through things, to be preparing for future teachings. And so building these Bible reading routines is tremendously important to us in ministry. And I had a comment on a picture several weeks back, and someone asked me about my own systematic reading plan. And I realized that I actually do have one, and I've been doing it for the last several years. And I want to tell you the story about some of what motivated me to get into that direction. Now, the first thing is this. I've been pretty vocal in the past about how much I love doing 90-day reads of the Bible. I've been doing it off and on for about 7 years now. I've probably read the Bible through about 20 times in that time block, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. When I first started doing that, people questioned me because they're like, "Man, you're not going to get to read anything like deep enough to actually think about it." Like, I'll tell people a lot that want to read the Bible in 90 days. I'll tell them, "Man, you need to pretend it's like a newspaper and just read." And just boom, boom, boom. And so and there's a blog post. There's a link on the show notes called "Why I Read the Bible Every 90 Days" if you want some more information on that. But even doing that, like even the times I would have cycles of years where I would hit it literally 4 times in a row, all 4 quarters, and it would be awesome, I would still feel like I was really, really janky, like I had holes missing, that I needed a better Bible reading routine. And so a couple of years ago, I was in a mentoring group with Pastor Mike Slaughter and Pastor Adam Hamilton, 2 high-profile United Methodist Church pastors. And Mike talked about this reading plan, that this reading strategy that he had developed, and he shared it with us. And I looked over it, and I modified it, and I made some notes. And for the last about 3 years, I've been doing this off and on. And so we're going to talk about that today, talk a little bit about this reading routine and how it helps, how I read. I'm going to talk about my own personal reading routine. And I've also got a downloaded worksheet in the show notes for you to download, check out, if you just want to see a simple breakdown of what I do. But a couple things about why a Bible reading routine makes sense. The first one is this: it helps you collect your thoughts. I mean, there's something about just having that notebook right there in front of you, and you can go back and you can go forward and you can store it. There's just something about collecting your thoughts about Scripture. It makes us just slow down a moment to drill into some verses. It helps us to realize when and where and how we are reading the Bible. Okay? I don't want to use the word systematic because that really is just not kind of the way that I roll, but that's what it is. It's this long-term thing that we're choosing to do. And it helps me to get back and to see, because so much of my own Bible reading plan, of this Bible reading routine, is taking notes on what I'm reading. It's a lot simpler. I'm going to explain that in a little bit. But it just lets me see what's going on. It helps me realize when I'm starting to fall behind. Like when I look and I open this notebook up and I realize that I'm having 4 or 5 days between entries. Or then I'm realizing, I'm sitting back, I'm seeing, there's 3 weeks straight. I've made 21 days in a row. That's amazing. What's going on then? This whole idea. And then the last thing about why it makes sense is this idea of the 20-mile march. I did not hear anything about this until my dad mentioned it last week when we were talking about just in the middle of a stressful season, and why the way I was able to keep my head above the water was I had kept up with my Bible reading. But it's this story, and Jim Collins tells it. There's a link to it in the show notes, that about 2 team adventurers, they decided to go at the South Pole at the same time, and they left pretty much at the exact same time. like a near perfect match. They know what's going on, comparable experience. I mean, they've got a team of people, just the whole 9 yards. And so what one team decided to do was to go for 20 miles a day. No matter what, they're going to go 20 miles a day. If they have a good day and they're going to finish early, if they have a rough day, they're going to work all day long and then get 20 miles. And the next team decided to take advantage of the weather and how their bodies were feeling and various other conditions. And so sometimes they would do 35 miles in a day, and they have days they do 5 miles in a day. And the team that made it to the pole first were the folks with the 20 miles a day march. It's just you keep the pace. 20 miles a day, no matter what, 20 miles a day. And so these regular Bible reading routines just help us to build this pattern of why we're taking care of ourselves. And the second thing is this, why I read systematically. And I decided to choose this word because some folks have done this, have done a similar thing using like the Upper Room or other devotional books. And I'm a fan of devotional books. I have a lot of them. But for me, they just don't really work that well. And so when I sat down to do this, I decided I'm going to read through whole books of the Bible and do this. And so far, I've done Luke, I've done Acts, I've done John, I'm doing Romans right now, and I did it through Judges. And so I've gotten a pretty good backlog of what's going on, and I break it into pericopes. That's the fancy word that I think we talked about in seminary, but nobody actually, it's the word you say when you want to sound smart. Most of the time, I just let the little headings in my New Living Translation decide how far I'm going to read. If it's a really big passage and it's like 20 verses, I'm going to break it up. I don't like to read more than 7 verses unless there's a reason to read 7 verses in a row. And so I do that, read through the Bible. Here's a few reasons why. The first was just to gain a greater clarity of the biblical narrative. There's something about taking a few months to read through a huge piece of scripture and to have all those notes in one place. I absolutely love it. The second one is this. I don't really dig into my own theological views that much on the website or the podcast, but I love and I function inside of the modern biblical theological framework. And so guys like G.K. Beale, huge fan of, my favorite Calvinist, Van Hooser, Voss, I think Graham Goldsworthy, Ritterboss, this usual gang of heroes that's in this idea of biblical theology, of canonical theology, of the entire Bible being this interconnected piece in this narrative that we need to think about as a whole. So for me, this reading strategy just completely helps me understand that better, and it helps my teaching. Also, some of it's like I want to be able to look back on a life of study and reading. Like I have all of my notebooks, these books I finished, like in a box in my office here at the house, and they're all right there. They help me dig deep into what I might not regularly do. My read through Romans has frustrated me so much, but it made me. I'm keeping through one step from the other, keep on making notes and thinking through things and praying and ask myself questions. And here's the deal. This does help and affect our preaching because it's been pretty frequently I need a reference. I need to think about a passage, something like this. And I know, wow, that's in one of the books that I've read through and taken notes on. And so I go to the box, I pull the notebook out, and I read and look at it. And I've used a lot of different notebooks for this. I've pretty much settled into every single notebook I use for anything right now is the same Muji A5 that I've shared before on the show notes. And so that's what I'm rolling with now. But I just pull the notebook out and I read it and I check it out. But I also know that there are future sermons inside of there, and I make notes of that. Like I put a star on the top of the page when I realized that this might be one that I'm going to do. And so that's how and why I read systematically. Now, my own personal reading routine, and I'm going to walk through what I do. I'm going to walk through the specific parts to the page, and then I'm going to let you remember to download this basic Bible reading sheet. And so this is what's going on. I have a standard routine. Every morning I do my 90-day read, and after I do that, I pull out my notebook and I make a quick outline. And so I just have this notebook, and one page is for each day, and I do some really simple things. I write the date, I write the passage, and then I have 2 larger sections. And then right underneath that, I write the word observation. If you have questions what any of this looks like, just look on Instagram because you'll see pictures of me doing this at Rev Chad Brooks, or you download the Bible reading sheet and it's kind of outlined there. And I just use that to just make note of whatever. Like I noticed this. This is interesting. Wow, this is getting repeated again. Okay, this is coming back up. This is answering this question I had from a couple days ago. I just make notes. I just make observations. I'm not very systematic about it whatsoever at all. And so I take roughly a half page to do those observations. And then the second section at the very bottom, a lot of times I just put application on there, but that's like a personal code word for me, because what I end up doing is asking myself a couple different questions. And the first one is this, like, what question is this making me ask? Like, is there something getting under my skin or just really crawling that I don't know the answer to? I write that down. The second one is this, like, what do I need to do in order to respond to this? And that's it. I don't start digging through accordance. I don't start digging through commentaries and that sort of thing, because I let this be devotional. And if it needs to go beyond devotional, I've got my notes right there where it happens. Now, you could do this in Evernote, something like this. I've tried it before. It's been okay. I prefer to do this pen and paper so I can go back and see it. I'm a big paper guy. But what I do is the very first page of the notebook, I leave that open. And if I have something that I think would make a good sermon or would make a good Bible study or would make a good devotional, something like that, I write down a few notes about it and what page it's on that front page. Sometimes I went through a season where I try to title everything. I don't worry about that anymore. But that's my own personal Bible reading routine. It's been just tremendously helpful to me. So this is what I would love to have and to hear you do. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know what are the problems that you have with Bible reading. What are the things about your own personal life? You might be in ministry. You might not be in ministry. What are the things that are going on, your struggles with Bible reading, and the ways that you're trying to overcome those struggles? You can hit me back up on Twitter at RevChadBrooks. To do that, use the hashtag #ProductivePastor. We'd love to get some conversation going in on that. Now, a little bit of stuff on the back matter. Please remember that you can review and rate on iTunes. That does this fantastic job of helping get the word of the podcast out to other people. And so just go in there. It takes 5 seconds. It does something with iTunes magic algorithm that helps them to let other folks know about the podcast. Now, if you want to support us, you want to help us out, please do that. Second thing is this. If you want some more of my writing about productivity and theology, my thoughts about that, and also some free content, I like to give content away to these folks first. I encourage you just to subscribe to the Productive Pastor Insider List. You can go in the show notes. There'll be a link to do that at. But remember this, till next time, we've got a couple things that could be really awesome for our next episode, trying to figure out those right now. Remember that God has called us to things, and that when we understand our call and how to work inside of that call, we will find ourselves as better people. We will find ourselves as better leaders and better pastors. We will find ourselves as better sons and daughters of God because of Jesus Christ. And so thanks so much for listening. Hope you have a great week and stay productive. So it's wild listening back to those words of my own from 2017, I think that episode came through. 6 years ago. Wow. And I'm thinking how things have changed, what they are now versus what they were then, all that sort of stuff. But I see the beginning and really the foundation of still what I do today. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I would love to hear you talk about your own Bible routine. I invite you to come hang out with us in the Productive Pastor community on Facebook. You'll find a link to that in the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/076, episode 76. It might be 77. Anyway, just cruise over there. Come hang out in Facebook community with us on that. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for subscribing to the emails, being part of this whole thing. I see this as, I tell people I'm a steward of this because I really want this, and I do see this as a community of people striving together towards productive ministry, towards pastors of normal-sized churches, just doing the things that we are called to do where we are. So thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you back next week with a brand new episode.